Welcome to Straight Talk. Rural residents younger than 15 are bemoaning the increase in the age at which they'll be able to sit their driver's licence. And parents are pretty upset as well, as they contemplate another year of ferrying their offspring to and fro to college and all-important social activities. But AgResearch is celebrating its licence to not only continue, but to extend its transgenic research to the dismay of the Greens and other opposing groups. And this in the week when a KPMG agribusiness report says New Zealand must protect its clean, green, golden goose. Today I'm joined by National Business Review editor Neville Gibson and former Federated Farmers Vice President Keith Hanning. Welcome. Now, Neville, you've got teenagers. This comes pretty hard to city folk, but those out in the rural areas, they've really got the sharp end of the stick here, haven't they? Yeah,
I think it's quite... it's quite inflexible, the system, and quite unnecessary for the country folk. There's already quite a lot of provision for provisional licences and conditions, so I don't see why some sort of mechanism wasn't used so that people in rural areas who qualified could get the licence at a younger age, at least to go through the provisional stages. But in the city, most parents don't want their kids out driving anyway, and I've got an 18-year-old who's only just qualified, and the 16-year-old's dead keen on cars but hasn't actually made the move to apply for a licence yet. Right.
So, Keith, do you think the government took enough notice of Federated Farmers' pleas that there is a special case out there in the country areas?
I don't think they did, because first of all, there's no subsidised bus transport for people in the rural areas. Secondly, a lot of farmers have one partner working off the farm, and so there's only the working person on the farm. There's nobody else available to cart people. And I think there's younger people who don't do well at high school that want to leave school as soon as they can, get a job on the farm. They're disadvantaged as well. So I think it's totally negative.
At a time when there are some problems in terms of attracting youngsters to the country and to rural jobs, particularly in dairying and so forth, is this restriction going to be a real impediment there?
Well, it is, because they have to find another means of transport to the property when there's social life, or if they're playing sport at the weekends. They're just totally disadvantaged.
Right. Now, I heard Lachlan McKenzie, the dairy section chairman, speaking on national radio, saying that rural drivers generally came to driving better equipped than people in the city. He used his own example. He said, I was driving vehicles on farm when I was 12. Should there be more notice taken of this, Neville, the fact that youngsters in the country do get that opportunity to get out there and have a go early?
Well, certainly, I think they're very familiar with driving all sorts of vehicles, and we go to Timaru quite a lot, and it's amazing how many people there, and I think in the larger towns it also should apply. The Minister quoted some quite compelling statistics, and I can't really challenge those, but he has put a cap at 17, so really what we're talking about is lifting the whole rigmarole by 1 year only, and it looks like it's not going to go beyond that, unlike some media reports said.
Yeah, well, that at least is comforting. Do you think that somehow or other the whole boy racer issue has got mixed up in this?
Well, we're getting the report next week of the review of Sale of Liquor Act, and I would imagine that if there's an age goes through that's higher there, that policing of that act, which of course is one of the problems, is that a lot of these acts aren't policed, that there won't be a drink and driving issue for anybody under the age of possibly 20.
Right. So that may have some influence to bear at that level of things.
My daughter steered my truck when I was feeding the sheep at the age of 4 on a flat paddock, I might add. My boys could all drive. We had over 2 kilometres of roads on our farm. They could all drive very confidently at 12 years old. So, you know, there's a lot of experience gone in before they got their licences at 15.
Right. So this is something that should be taken much more notice of.
I agree entirely.
And do you think that would be the case across most farmers and different farming types, that
I would think
their kids would have this sort of practice?
I agree.
Yeah. So, well, we'll wait and see what happens with the report you're talking about, Neville. Now, on to the AgResearch decision. Obviously great for them in terms of continuing with transgenic research, but is it a good thing for New Zealand, Neville?
Oh, I think we have to be there along with the rest of the world. The public are well behind on this issue. I'm not quite sure why that is the case, but in Europe it's coming in under the radar. Potatoes have just been approved, but the Greens have certainly taken the high ground by calling any kind of GM experiment, or whether it be food or animals, contamination. They use these sort of words, and like the Irma report talks about keeping it within a confine as though it makes any difference. In fact, it doesn't, as most scientists would agree. But how you get the public moving on, I don't know. But there's a big difference between, in some reports, about what the public says they want or don't want and what they buy, and they want cheaper food. That's no question about that, and one hopes that progress will prevail in this case.
Can I say also, China's spending $4 billion a year on research on this area. New Zealand's looking at $30 million. I think if we're going to stay ahead in the world, we've got to do all this research. I think, firstly, perhaps in the health areas, there's been... let's face it, we've had some of these things in the system for 5 years and nobody's turned up with eyes that pop out or anything like that. I mean, it's being proved in many countries now.
But as Neville said, there still seems to be a weight of public opinion that is behind the Greens in terms of thinking about New Zealand as a country that doesn't get involved in these sort of nasties, if you like.
Well, we'll have to be involved if we want to stay as a country the way we hope to be.
Right. Neville, how does this approval by Irma, how does this sit with the ag research moves to downsize? They're cutting quite a number of staff, and this morning there's news that they're cutting more in the wool research area.
Yeah, I've talked to a number of people about this, and it would seem that the message isn't really getting out there. It looks bad to be cutting the job of scientists and so on, but in the reports I heard this morning on radio, the lack of a levy for research didn't come up as an issue, so perhaps there's a bit of a gap there, because obviously funding's important for scientists, whereas, say, the wine industry, which does have, where they've backed the levy, so maybe they can blame the wool growers for that. So that's a pity, but of course if there is no projects and no funding for scientists, they have to move on and do another one. I like to think that scientists would look at their jobs a little bit with more a view of the film industry, where they do go for projects and then realise that projects have to come to an end rather than seeking entitlements. Right,
yeah.
The other thing too is, that was stated this morning, they're moving staff from that area, which was mainly related to wool research, into other areas related to dairying and even, say, the sequestering of carbon and so in grasses, all those sort of areas. So they're moving the emphasis mainly because of the loss of the levy. Yes,
so that would be good news to farmers in those sectors in terms of having that research coming through there.
Correct.
Yeah. What about the influence that the Irma decision might have on New Zealand's clean green image? There was this report this week in the New Zealand Herald regarding the KPMG agri-business report. Neville, you've read the report. It seems to be pretty strong on the idea that our clean green image is a huge marketing advantage.
Well, I'm not so sure about that. Perhaps it works in tourism, but most tourists here aren't there for that reason. And certainly in food marketing, it doesn't have the impact that some people would believe. And so I think it's a little bit overdone, and perhaps we need to move on that one as well.
What's your view, Keith? You think the clean green image is still a vital plank of...
I think it is. I think we've just had American friends staying with us, and certainly to them it's important that this clean green image is continued and the sustainable image is continued. I think it's very important.
So as far as the report goes, with talking about closer connections with end consumers, we've got to be very aware of those feelings, don't we, in our marketplaces?
Oh, I agree. But the early part of another report I've read is the amount of land being taken by China, India, Saudi Arabia, Korea, in Africa and other countries to build up the production of the sort of foods we produce. And that, to me, is where the big issue lies in the future.
Right. Because that was well highlighted in the report, wasn't it, Neville, saying that New Zealand has sort of at most a 5-year advantage in terms of commodity product production.
That's right, and because intensification, how much more use you can get out of land is really a scientific